listening to The Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Happy Tuesday, friends. Thank you for joining me on the Motherhood Experience podcast today. So excited to introduce you to a new guest, Lisa Foley. Lisa is yet another friend of the one and only TracyFixin.com. Tracy is apparently an honorary co-producer of the Motherhood Experience. I'm making it official that she's an unofficial co-producer. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm making it up as I go along. Lisa and Tracy have been friends for many years. They have husbands who grew up together, and so that is how they know each other. And Lisa has followed me from my blogging days, and so she knows a lot about my story and a lot about me, and I was kind of flying blind. But I had a great conversation with her, and I'm going to turn you over to it right now. And welcome Lisa to the Motherhood Experience. How are you, Lisa?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm just fantastic. Thank you for asking. You kind of know who I am. I don't really know who you are. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself to the listeners.
Sounds good. Yes. So I feel like I know you, and it's such a weird feeling to feel like you know someone and they don't have a clue who you are, like people you watch on YouTube and stuff. But I was introduced to you through Tracy Fixin, as a number of your guests have been introduced to you. But this was like way back, like when Tracy and, you did 35 Under 35. And I don't know when you started your blog, but I learned about it and I read it. And then you kind of disappeared. I disappeared off the face of the earth for a little while.
Yes.
And then I every once in a while I'd think of you and I'd look up your blog again and check in to see what you're doing. And so yeah, that's how I know you.
That's so humbling to hear, first of all. And also, Tracy, just a rock star friend. I mean, I feel like a friend of Tracy's is a friend of all of ours. So I'm super thrilled that you were willing and able to be a guest on the podcast. So let's start off with ages and stages. Tell me how old your kids are and what stage of motherhood you're in.
So my oldest is 15, going to be 16 this summer, which is just a really crazy feeling. And then I have a 13-year-old son. So my oldest is Brecken. He's 15, almost 16. Brevin is 13. Brinley is 11. Britta is almost 9. And my baby is almost 6, and her name is Breelyn.
So all of your kids start with the same letter.
They do. And my husband is one of 9 kids that all started with the same letter. And I'm one of 3 kids that started with the same letter. So it just seemed like we didn't really have a choice to just pick a letter.
I love this because at the time that you and I are recording this, an episode will have been out for, I don't know, maybe a month or so, where I talked with another mom. She had 5 kids. The episode is with Nikki England. She didn't intend to have them all start with the same letter, but then essentially they did. And we talked a little bit about how other families kind of do that repeating letter or repeating consonant or something. So that's so great that you and your husband both come from those.
We committed to a letter and then took it a step further and committed to 2 letters. So they are all BR. And it wasn't really intentional, but they all, are 2 syllables. So
okay.
That part wasn't really intentional, but once I got to the 4th one and the 5th one, it was like, well, it kind of would sound funny if they
So tell me then, how often do you mix up calling them by the wrong name?
I don't think I do it all that often. I sometimes, will rattle through a couple, but I always say at least I'm halfway there, like, Brit, I'm close.
Right.
So my mom used to do the same thing. We're Lisa, Lori, Lana, and she would go, so. And my dad is Louie and my mom is Eileen, and her family called her Leanie. So we were kind of all L's. in our family too. So
Isn't that
it's
so
just
funny?
normal for us. So
I think it's adorable. And my sister and I are both V's. All three of my kids are H's. Like, but that's incredible that your husband, you said, comes from a family of nine and they're all the same.
hmm
Wow.
one brother was Tony and his name was Anthony, but otherwise all of them their full names started with T. So
Wow.
yep.
That's so great. Okay, so your husband comes from a family of nine, you come from a family of three. When you got together, was he an advocate for having a big family? Was that something you desired? What did that look like?
You know, I I think back to that, and it I don't know that we ever really talked a whole lot about numbers. It was more so just that like at the time that we met, which was is a story in and of itself. We both were just like ready to get married and start a family, and we certainly weren't scared of having a number of kids. And my mom is one of 13, and I had 59 cousins on my mom's side. And so large families, though mine only had three, I had cousins, you know, like I had large families were not abnormal to me. And so like a family of two is more weird to me than a family of five. So
Okay.
um 59,
I,
yes, 59.
I need to unpack this. Okay. So your household, you grew up with two sisters. Is that
hmm
what I
Yep,
heard you say? Okay.
yep.
So you grew up with two sisters, fairly normal, quiet-ish home. What
Yeah, I
were
mean
your
there yeah.
what were your family reunions like?
They weren't even really reunions. Like a lot of my family lived close. So until I was about, I don't know, 15, like we got together for Christmas Eve, every Christmas Eve. And it started at my grandma's house. And when she moved into town and was in a smaller house, then it went to my aunt and uncle's house. And then there were a few years we met at like a community center. Um, and we haven't met all together for a few years just because you know everybody's all grown up and moved away and it's harder to get together but and my grandma has passed away so but yeah I mean it was just like my grandma's house Christmas Eve we have like home video of it from like 1990 you know early 90s and it's like loud and crowded and it was a blast like you got it was like playing with all your best friends.
Well, at first I was going to ask you what it was like, to meet your husband and meet his family because I thought that would be chaos when you came from a family of three, but now I see that was not chaos at
No.
all. Okay, so
No.
so back to you then
hmm
becoming a mother, like big families didn't scare you. Uh, kind of tell me about how, as you had each child, then did you just keep thinking, yeah, we can keep doing this, or did that change over time? What's the story there?
So I would say going all the way back, like if you would ask me how many kids that I plan to have, I know that the number five was always somewhere in the back of my head, but it kind of felt like, ooh, that's a lot, you know, like that's a lot by society standards. And like that might be too much, you know. And so I guess we never set out to have five kids. You know, we got married in um, October, and a month later we were pregnant. And so it was, you know, like we weren't not go, you know, like we weren't going to wait a certain number of years or time, or we had no reason to wait. So we just might as well get started.
Right.
And it turned out that we got pregnant very easily. And so, and this is a really crazy thing, but so Tracy, I know Tracy through, I had a class with her in college, oddly, freshman year. And then her husband and my husband have been friends since kindergarten and they currently work together. So, but anyway, the day that I took a pregnancy test was the day of Tracy's mom's funeral. And we were going to go to it, but there was bad weather and my husband was leaving town. And so that just always is like there. Like that's the day I took my
Mm.
pregnancy test. And so anyway, so we had one and you know, I wasn't scared of motherhood. I was like, oh yeah, this is, you know, motherhood is that's just I always wanted to be a mom when people, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a mom. And I guess I'll be a teacher too, but I want to be a mom. And so first one came, relatively easy pregnancy, relatively easy postpartum. Nursing came very easily. I wasn't working. I quit my full time job shortly after I found out I was pregnant and just started subbing because we always intended for me to be at home with the kids. Like that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to work.
Sure.
And so we had the first one. It went relatively well. It seemed like no big deal, and it was around the time he was about, I don't know, a little over a year. We were living in a house that just had one bedroom, and we thought, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to move? Are we going to remodel our house? Are we going to add on to our house? Like, what do we, or if we have more kids, like we can't live in this one bedroom house. And so ultimately, we were going home to my family every weekend and thought, well, we're already going there every weekend. Maybe we should just move there. And so my husband checked with his boss. This was before, 17 years ago, before working from home was like well, not 17, 15, 16 years ago,
Yeah.
before that was a normal thing to, for people to work from home almost exclusively. And so he, checked with his brother-in-law, like, hey, would this be a possibility? Because I don't really want to commute an hour every day. And he was okay with it. And so we put our house on the market, and we thought it would take a long time to sell because it was only one bedroom and in a small town. And 11 days later, we had an offer. And so we were like, okay, plan B, we'll just move in with my parents and we'll figure out what we're going to do. So we moved in with my parents. Our oldest was a year and a half old. And shortly after that, we were pregnant with our second. Relatively easy pregnancy. We were living with my parents. And so there were 4 adults to 1 toddler, which is really easy. I could take naps whenever
Sure.
I wanted to.
Yeah.
He would wake up and go downstairs and have breakfast with grandpa and grandma, and I got to sleep in as long as I felt like. So that pregnancy was very easy, other than it was a really hot summer, and there was not air conditioning in my parents' 100-year-old house. So,
Hmm.
but then we also decided to build a house at that time too, right next door to my parents. So that whole pregnancy was spent, or half of it was spent general contracting and doing a lot of the work ourselves and building our house. So we have the second baby. That relative ease, all things. My measuring stick is a little bit different after experience of 5, but um, that went. 2 kids seemed like no big deal. Like that we can do this, we can handle this. My parents are next
Yeah.
door, so we've got extra help and extra hands fairly frequently. And started to get baby fever. Okay, let's go for the third one. Like nothing's stopping us. And those 2 were a little closer in age, 22 months versus 27 months, which 5 months makes a little bit of a difference in
Huh.
at that age. So that pregnancy was super easy, other than the fact that for the first trimester I had morning sickness, and I hadn't had even a touch of that with the first 2. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is miserable. Like, I understand why people don't have any more kids if they have morning sickness. Like, this is awful. And on a scale of 1 to 10 now, it was like a 2. But at the time, I felt like it was like a 10 because it was, my measuring stick was different then. And
Sure.
so I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awful. But it only lasted a trimester. And then it was pretty smooth sailing after that. It was my easiest delivery. And so it was a girl. That's why I was sick, I guess. um, but after that, I did not have baby fever at all. And 3 was feeling pretty, a year in or so, 3 was feeling pretty overwhelming. I'm pretty sure that it was homeschooling gets thrown into the mix. I went to school to be a teacher. Kindergarten, preschool were like my favorite ages. And as I thought about sending my first to school, I was like, oh, but that's my favorite age. Like, why would I just don't know if I want to send him. Like,
Hmm.
maybe I'll just homeschool preschool and see how it goes. And maybe, So, but then I had a baby on August 30th and then was going to homeschool, starting like 2 weeks later. So I have a newborn and a super busy toddler that like could scale cabinets and never slowed down. And so it was difficult. And I questioned my sanity at that point, but we kept going. So we're Catholic, and the Catholic Church, it doesn't like the use of hormonal birth control, and so natural family planning was something that we were introduced to during our marriage prep. And after having the little like 1 hour like intro to natural family planning, and here are the things good and bad, whatever. I just really felt like that's what we were called to do, and so to be
Hmm.
open to life and to only avoid pregnancy if felt like you really needed to, and to be open to life. And so um I felt that for the most part, except I also like you track your fertility signs, and when when you are likely to get pregnant, when you're not likely to get pregnant, and all that. And so after the third one, we had successfully used natural family planning in between the first and second, and the second and third. And after the third, I think things were getting a little rusty, and maybe I was getting a little bit like, couldn't remember exactly. And so taking my temperature every morning, and happened to notice that um, my temperature had been elevated for like 15, 16 days. And for people that don't know, your luteal phase from ovulation to when you typically would start your period is generally not more than 14 days. So in the book, when I learned natural family planning through with this method, it was basically if your temperature is high for more than 14 days, you can just safely assume that you're pregnant. And so all of a sudden I had a panic, and I was like, whoops, what happened? What did I do? Like, and going back over the chart, like, what, huh? How did this happen? Like, I thought that I was doing this the right way. And I panicked, and I was not excited at all about that
Mm.
pregnancy. And I felt so guilty for not being excited about that, because like I have a cousin who it like took them 8 years to get pregnant, and here I am like just churning them out like without even trying. And so I felt guilty for not being excited about it like right off the bat, but it felt so like, I don't know, I think I had a little bit of like, I failed because I failed at this natural family planning. Like, what did I do wrong? A little bit like mad, like, why did this have to, like, this was not the plan. And I was very type A, and very much, like, we planned the first three, like
Right.
we had them when we wanted to have them. And
Yeah.
so it was a hard pill to swallow to be pregnant when I didn't plan it myself, like it wasn't my idea. And I remember having this conversation with God, and I was like a baby in my faith journey back then, I would say, but I remember thinking, okay, God, I will be open to this pregnancy, but it can't be like it was last time. Like, I have 3 kids to take care of. I am homeschooling. Like, I can't be sick like I was last time. And that's when God laughed in my face and said, like, okay. And about 2 weeks in, 2 weeks late after that pregnancy test, I got sick. And it was much more intense morning sickness than the previous one. And I thought, I just need to get through today. I just need to get through, the first trimester, and then it'll be better. And like, this was like incredible fatigue, couldn't get off the couch. I remember, like, what I remember is waking up, changing out of my pajamas into lounge clothes, going down to the recliner, turning on Curious George, and just hoping for the best. And my mom would come over, and she'd make breakfast for the kids, and she'd go back home. And then she'd come over at lunch, and she'd make lunch for the kids, and she'd go back home. And my husband would come in from, come up from his office downstairs. And like, I just feel like I spent the entire pregnancy on the couch. And I realized, like, well, the first trimester came and went, and it didn't go away. And I was dealing with a lot of emotional stuff and spiritual stuff and physical, like it was all like a ball of bad stuff. And
Mm.
after the fact, I think I had like what's called antenatal depression, which you don't hear of very often, but I was struggling, and I didn't recognize it as that until like hindsight's 2020.
Sure.
Um, but the sickness, just feeling so worthless because I couldn't do anything. I was contributing absolutely nothing to the household other than growing a human, which is important and a feat in and of
It's a pretty
itself.
big deal.
But it's kind of like, how can other people grow humans without feeling like this? Like, why did I have to feel like this? And so it was a challenge. It was as my therapist refers to it, it was my Vietnam. Like,
Mm.
it was a rough 9 months, like very challenging 9 months. And I feel like there's Lisa before and there's Lisa after. And
Mm.
nothing against that child, but just it took me a long time to be excited about it. And then once I did get excited about it, then I had anxiety about losing that pregnancy, because I was like, oh, great. Now I didn't, like I wasn't excited about this. So now I'm going to lose it. And then I'm going to be, like there was a
Yeah.
lot, I physically couldn't do anything. So all the energy was,
Yeah.
all the
Mental
thoughts going
Olympics.
through. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
Mm-hmm.
exhausting. So yeah, so that 9 months was pretty low. I don't have my memories are actually quite blurry from that period of my life. Sometimes I
Mm.
look back at pictures and I'm like, I don't remember that, and
Mm.
it was very challenging. So that baby came. It was a pretty traumatic birth in the fact that I had delivered my first three at the same hospital and saw the same few midwives. And I was so sick, I was like, I can't drive an hour because we lived an hour from that hospital at that point. And
Sure.
not a hospital, but the hospital that I wanted to be, or that I
Right.
had delivered the others at. And so it's like, I can't drive an hour to go to all of my appointments. Like, I can't even, like, I can't. So I wasn't even like showering more than once a week. Like, it was bad because if I showered, that was all I did in a day.
Wow.
And so doctoring more locally and went to the hospital to deliver, and things weren't really progressing, and they brought in an OB, and she, oh, they're not adequate, you're going to need to have, pitocin, we're going to need to get these going, and I can't have an epidural because my spine is curved, so everything's au natural. And it was just, and then I hemorrhaged a little bit, and then it she had to go under lights at 24 hours old because she had early onset jaundice, and we couldn't figure out, like, they couldn't figure out why. And so instead of cuddling my baby and nursing her like I wanted to do and go home to my other kids, we were stuck in the hospital, and it was super stressful. And so I was so excited to be done with the pregnancy, thinking that, okay, I can finally get back to normal. And then, like, another
Mm.
curveball thrown. And then I was
Mm.
like so excited to just get home to my kids. And then, like, life with four kids was kind of crazy. And so that didn't, like, life didn't go back to normal ever after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 9 months after she was born was almost as bad as the 9 months before. Like, it was a challenging 9 months. And then it's like a switch flipped, and I don't know, things started getting better. And we had decided definitely not going to have any more kids, because definitely not going to go through that again. And, but yet also natural family planning, open to life, but just like, no, we're definitely not going to try to have any more kids. And we're going to be very, very, very conservative about the rules we follow, and like very careful, because we were just like terrified to ever get pregnant again. And my husband too, because he didn't want to see me go through that again.
Sure.
And so about, well, 2 years and a few months after she was born, um, all of a sudden I realized my temperatures were elevated for 15 days. And I was like, oh crap, what happened now? Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, this is not, I thought I was doing everything right. And looking back at my chart, um, it was a situation that in the textbooks has a 1% chance. So I realized, and I was in a much different place spiritually by the time that happened. And I was like, okay, I see what you're doing here, God. Like, the
Mm.
door was a little bit cracked open. You took advantage. Your plan is better than mine. I'm going to just go with it, but like, help
Mm.
me out a little bit here. And instead of saying, like, giving an ultimatum, I was like, I'll do it, but like, you're going to have to get me through it, because I'm not sure how like PTSD, like it was just bad. And so I always knew, after, like, even though as traumatic as that pregnancy, the fourth pregnancy and delivery was, in the back of my mind, I always felt like there was one more, and that was going to be the redeeming end to all of, like, it was going to redeem all of that somehow. Like, there, it was going to, and I didn't want to, I didn't want to have another baby, but I always kind of knew that I would.
Huh.
And it was weird because I was like, I don't want to sign up for that again. Like, that's not, I don't want to do that by choice. So God knew that I wasn't going to do it by choice. So he had to, force it a little bit. Um, but I went on quite a spiritual journey during that pregnancy, read a lot of books, Childbirth Without Fear, the spiritual gift of motherhood, just a number, anything I could get my hands on, because I was like, I'm going to do everything in my power. I know that I don't have all the power, but I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that this pregnancy and delivery and everything goes as well as possible. So it was better about taking supplements and trying to, do all the exercises and everything that I could do in my power to make it better. And it ended up, though I was tired, very, very tired, and even though I had prodromal labor for 7 days before I finally delivered, it went off without a hitch. Nitrous oxide had been brought back into labor and delivery, and that is just an amazing, amazing thing. So call the midwife days. They like, that's good. It works well. So yeah, that was how I got my 5 kids. And it, yes, there it was not always by choice, but it certainly has always been a blessing, and always like God has always provided I guess the grace that we've needed to, take on each additional kid. But so no, I
Yeah.
didn't really set out to have 5 kids. And it was a roller coaster. But
Yeah.
I don't think I'd go back and change it.
I love how, though, with your fourth pregnancy, you're kind of like, okay, God, here's what you're gonna do.
Right.
And then the fifth pregnancy, you're like, I surrender this and I'm relying on you. I'm not
Right.
telling you
Right.
how this needs to go. I'm telling you that I need to rely on you for how this
Right.
is going to go. So I
Yeah.
love that kind of redemptive quality on that respect, but also in the fact that it was a better pregnancy and
Yeah. And
delivery than and a growth really for
very
you.
much, very much. And, like I would like the fourth delivery was really like a, turmoil like. And I remember just that, like, why God, why?
Yeah.
And in kind of like an angry way. And then the fifth one, it was kind of like, okay, I see what you're doing here.
Mm,
Like I see the lessons that I've learned through this and how I grew. And, um, you know, people always wonder why, why do bad things happen to good people? And why does suffering have to be a part of our, why does suffering have to be a part of life? And and why does God let it happen? And I've learned a lot about like, well, God doesn't make it happen, but he allows it to happen to help you to grow as a person and to become a better person. And so sometimes those things, like always good comes out of it. And
mm,
it's just not fun, and nobody signs up for it, but you have to try to find the silver linings, I guess, or the lessons. And I guess I learned a lot of them, but it took a long time. And
yeah.
it wasn't until probably a few years later, even maybe after that fifth delivery, that I learned about, people like processing their traumatic births and like therapy and
Mm,
things like that. And I'm like, yeah, people should do that, because you don't
yeah.
always recognize the trauma for what it is. And then it's like, no, that like that constitutes as trauma. You can't measure it against anyone else's trauma, but
Right.
it was your trauma. And
Right.
so talking about it,
And
processing it, I did a lot of that during that fifth pregnancy, trying to process that to try to help me be
I
better.
think that raises such a great point too, because especially like just because you didn't experience X doesn't mean that situations Y and Z weren't traumatic for you. And I mean, I've I have had some trauma. You know this
Hmm.
following my
Hmm.
blog. But the other day, I was talking with a friend about her daughter potentially getting braces, and I wore braces for a year and 8 months in high school. And I had two gum surgeries while I had
Oh,
braces. And I've like, my mouth has been through a lot of trauma. And I had a
hmm.
terrible periodontist experience. And I
Oh,
swear I would never go back. And so, like, I go get my teeth cleaned and I cry in the dentist chair. Like, and I
yeah,
have to explain to them every time, almost in defense of myself, like, my mouth has been through a lot,
right.
But I was talking to her about her daughter getting braces and my heart rate elevated. And I was like, I can't even talk about this anymore
Yeah,
because I was processing the trauma I
yeah.
endured from
PTSD
having my
is a
mouth
real thing,
worked
and it's
on.
about a lot of different things. Like it's.
So different. You would think, I
Mhm.
mean, like, I have experienced the worst of probably all experiences in parenthood, but man, you talk about getting my mouth worked on and I fall apart. It's
Yeah,
terrible. Anyway,
yeah,
I love that you
yep.
brought that up. And also, talking about learning experiences and all of this, you mentioned homeschooling. And so, do you still homeschool all five of your kids?
Yes. Probably not the way anybody thinks. Like everyone when we set out to homeschool, I never intended to homeschool. I was a college educated, degree holding teacher, when I started, and never in a million years would I have, when I graduated college, would I have thought that I would have ever thought to homeschool. And I had some cousins that homeschooled, so it wasn't a completely foreign concept to me, but it was kind of like, no, I don't want to do that. And I don't know, I felt like more and more drawn to it as time went on. And, took a little bit more convincing on my husband's part, because he's like, what I mean, school had a lot of good things. And, he went to a tiny little school, graduated with like 17 people or, 20 people, and Tracy's husband being one of them. And, like he, had a different experience, but in a good, relatively good. But the more we think about it, our experience, the more we realize, like there was a lot of not good that came with it. And, things that our kids, it's odd to think about how our kids haven't experienced any of that. They've certainly experienced other things, but it's, and so it took a little more convincing to get him fully on board with the idea. And my parents too were initially not super excited about the idea. Took a few years in before like my dad would speak about like, oh yeah, that's a good thing. And, tell other people about it and say positive things about, about it. And now I can't imagine life any, people are always like, well, are you going to keep doing it? Like, are you going to like through high school? And like, well, I mean, we're going to keep doing it as long as it works. And they're not, like, and I can't even imagine sending them to school at this point. So,
so you've been homeschooling for like what,
this is our 10th year.
10 years.
11th if you count some preschool, and like I did a couple years of preschool before that, so very mild.
And I feel like, I mean, you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard me talk to other homeschooling moms. Don't you feel like it's so common? And for me, it's more common than I think I realized, how all of these homeschool moms I know start in this place of, I'm not sure that that's what I want to do, and move to a place of, I can't imagine our life any other way from doing this. Isn't that so funny?
It really is. And I remember reading your blog when you were like debating homes, and I was like, go Val, go Val, go Val, like just do it, just do it, just do it. Because it, like a lot of people just can't quite like, how do you do it? And how do, like, because they're picturing, what they're picturing is not anything like what we're doing. Like that, don't like whatever you have in your head is not at all what people are likely doing. And it took me a long time. Like I had to unlearn. I fought tooth and nail against like instinct, like motherly kind of teaching instinct versus what I learned in college. And it like, my college degree helped people accept me homeschooling, but it actually was very challenging. Like it made my homeschooling experience more challenging because of like
two different worlds were colliding at that point.
Yes. And conflicting environments where, like two different conflicting things were kind of colliding. And it was like everything I've ever known, but really this. And it probably took me longer to really, I had to really, really unlearn a lot of what, or like learn something different or a different perspective. And so it took a long time. And so I had boys, and I grew up in a family of 3 girls, and we liked to color, and like I would bring home workbooks at the end of the school year, and I would play school all summer long with my imaginary students. And, like sitting down and doing worksheets, like I did them for fun. Like I would bring home workbooks and like finish them during the summer because that was fun. And I had boys, and I didn't know what to do with them because they had zero interest in sitting and coloring or doing crafts or like doing anything that resembled school. They certainly were learning, but they were doing it in a completely different way. And so, I had these, and I thought, I know as a teacher, like I taught 1 year kindergarten and taught 1 year in a preschool / daycare setting, and then did a year of subbing. And I knew how schools viewed rambunctious little boys. And it's not always in a good light. And I saw my children, my boys, and I thought, I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I don't think there's anything wrong with the way that they're living life. I don't want that to be beaten out of them, or, like I want them to be curious. I want them to be go-getters. I want them to question things. I want them, like, I don't want them to just be like, okay, I'll do it because you said I'll do it. Like it just, it was so counter to what I felt like inside. So we're in year 10. We follow what I would consider a very relaxed homeschool. We are not sitting down and working in books for 3 or 4 hours a day. That fourth pregnancy, we watched Curious George for like a year. I mean, my kids learned how to take care of me. My kids learned how to like be self-sufficient. Like they started cooking, like my 6-year-old was like learning to cook eggs. And it was a time, like it forced me to look at education and life experiences in a different way, because it was like I have to just submit to this, because I can't do what I want to do or what I feel like I should be doing. We just need
Yeah.
to experience life. And so we just did. And it wasn't pretty and it didn't look like school a lot of the time, but I guarantee you they learned stuff that year.
It's
So,
incredible to me when I don't think they're paying attention
mhm,
to their surroundings or whatever. They end up learning so
mhm.
much.
I still remember when my son was probably around that 6 year old time, and I'm sorry, he would have been 8 when the during my fourth pregnancy, but I remember when he was about 6, he was telling me about composting and how you need to have green stuff, and I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, like on Curious George, there, like
Oh,
you can learn valuable thing, like the Perseids meteors. Like that's an episode of Curious George, and now every time they're talking about the Perseids in the news, I'm like, yeah, I learned about that on Curious George. Like, so you can learn things. You can learn things. What and
for
I
sure.
I was very much like, no, no, kids can't just sit and watch TV all day. And then I was like, well, we need to survive, and that's what we're gonna do to survive. And so
Yeah.
that's I let go of the pride that I felt in what someone might think about me letting my kids watch TV for hours on end, but we just had to survive. So
So let me ask you then about your homeschool mom. You've got 5 kids. The oldest is 15, almost 16. How old is your youngest?
she will be 6 May 1st,
Oh, that's
which is
such a
crazy.
sweet age.
It is.
Um, so how do you recharge?
Oh, that's an interesting thing. So when I had 4 kids and I was super stressed out, and moms would talk about things like self-care and doing things, I would get angry because I felt so like, because this fourth child would not take a pacifier. I was her pacifier. So we were attached
Mm,
together 24/7, or so it
mm-hmm,
felt. And I was so incredibly touched out, like, don't even look at me. Like, I don't
mm-hmm.
want to be touched. Leave me alone. I just can't handle it. And I did not take the idea of self care seriously, because to me it felt selfish. And it felt, like you'd talk, like women would be like, oh, I gotta go get my hair done, go get my nails done. I gotta go out with my girlfriends. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. And I just looked at them with the judgiest, judging eyes and thought, you hate your children. Why do you hate your children? Why did you have them if you don't even want to hang out with them and don't want to take care of them? And I thought really bad, like mean things. And then after it was a good kind of almost during COVID, really, that I realized and kind of shifted my thinking, like that whole you can't pour from an empty cup thing. Like I was
Yeah.
trying real hard to pour from an empty cup for a lot of years, and it was not good. And I was not a happy person. And I hope my kids don't remember that mom, um, the crabby mom, because I was not doing anything to take care of myself. And so during COVID, I started seeing a therapist, which has been excellent. I highly recommend that, because just talking things through with somebody is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning of that, like she recognized my need to like have time. And so like there was like set nights that like Taylor was in charge, and I, like went to the bedroom and just shut the door and like, don't talk to me. Don't ask me a question. I'm not, not making any decisions for anyone. Um, and I started going to adoration once a week for an hour. And so I had this hour of peace and quiet. I called it my date with Jesus. And so I just went and sat at the church and with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, and I just like could think clearly, like thoughts
Yeah.
without being interrupted. And I did that for gosh, probably a year, and eventually I took up another hour. So I was doing that 2 hours a week, and it was so incredibly peaceful and life giving to like felt like I was gaining some life back. Um, and more recently, last winter, my son wanted to get a job at the local ski hill. And so he was 14 and I was going to have to give him a ride. And I thought, I don't want to give you a ride, drop you off to work your, $10 an hour job for 3 hours, because that's all the more 15 year or 14-year-old can work a shift at a time in
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota. And so I was like, well, maybe I should just get a job there too. And then, I can get the free season pass. You can get the free season pass. We had just started skiing a couple years before that as a family. and really enjoyed it. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just get a job there too. And so I started, and I was intending to work 15 hours a week. And my manager, like it slowly crept up, and it was like me, like, oh well, I can work that, or I can do that, I can do that, like I enjoy this, like I like getting out of the house, I can talk to other people, like this is fun. And it was working in the cafe, and I my first job was working at Dairy Queen. So anyway, so I got this job. It ended up that I was working like 20, 25 hours a week, getting out of the house. My kids were skiing a lot, they were having a blast. And at the end of the season, they had restructured things a little bit and made the cafe manager position a seasonal position, and my manager was let go. And then I was like, uh-oh, I think they're going to call me. And so I ended up getting a phone call wondering if I would be interested in doing that. And I was scared, really scared, because I was like, oh, do I want to take on that responsibility? And like, can I do that? Like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, I haven't worked outside of the home. I haven't had a, like, and it was, I just questioned if I was capable of doing that. And it was so weird because I'm like, of course I'm capable of doing this. Like, why wouldn't I be? But it was still scary and I was like, oh, how can we do this? And like, I still want to homeschool my kids. I don't want to send them to school so that I can, I don't need to have a job. Our family can survive on my husband's income. So it was less about money or need. And I was like, but I like this and I enjoy it. And it's filling my cup. Like it's certainly filling my cup in more ways than one. And so I agreed to it. And 2 weeks later, our general manager, Mark Knutson, Fargo Marathon guy, was
Mm-hmm.
killed in an accident. And I thought, okay, God, what is this? Like, I was already stepping out on a limb, and he was a really good cheerleader, and now he's gone. So is this a sign that I'm supposed to not do this? Am I supposed to stay back with my kids, or is this something else? And do I keep going? And I really, again, more spiritual battles and questioning myself and questioning, am I supposed to do this? Am I not supposed to do this? Because I
Mm-hmm.
felt called to motherhood. I felt called to homeschool. Was I really being called to like kind of step away from my kids and go do this? Like it was hard. So ultimately I said yes and jumped in, and it's been a little bit of a wild ride. And we had a terrible season compared to last year. And I wouldn't normally consider myself someone who deals well with change and adapts easily. Um, but I did really well. I'm like patting myself on the back because that was what our entire season was. And I did well. Like, yay me. I grew as a person. Like, here's another experience
Yeah.
that I like was kind of
Yeah.
pushed to grow as a person. And so that's what's filling my cup currently, is having a job, which seems weird, and it's seasonal. So I'm kind of like not really working hardly any hours right now, just kind of finishing some things up. And it's going to be spring and garden season and 4-H and, summer stuff soon.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what's filling my cup currently.
I love that answer. I love that you have found a productive outlet outside of your family. I mean, of course, your kids are the most important, and
Right.
you have been productive there for many, many years. And so to be able to continue to be productive outside of that is phenomenal. So well done for me. What's like, if you had one piece of encouragement to offer other moms who are listening to your episode today, what would you offer them?
Oh gosh, that's tricky. I guess I would probably have to say something to the effect of, like, God's plan is better than yours. So you need to trust in, that if things don't go I think so many people set out with their own plans and don't like when their plans get interrupted or don't see it as a positive thing. And so really step back at every challenge that you come to and think, and I had gotten some good advice from my old priest. He said, instead of looking at things like as a why is this happening, ask yourself, what is God inviting me to in this? And so
Mm,
that rings, like I keep like every time I'm like, okay, what is God inviting me to right now? Like every that can apply to like the teeniest, tiniest little things and big
for
things.
sure.
And so like what is God inviting me to? So instead of why is this happening, kind of turn it around and what is God inviting me to? And be open to it.
I love that so much. Lisa, thank you again for being
Thanks
a
for
guest
having
on the
me.
Motherhood Experience. It has been a joy, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you later.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.